Genesis 2, 18 and 21 through 25. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This is at last the bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one was taken." Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed.
I recently read an account of the evolution of a husband's response to his wife coming down with a cold. Here's how it goes. The first year of their marriage, the husband says, "Sugar dumpling, I'm really worried about my baby girl. You've got a bad sniffle, and there's no telling about these things with all the strep throat going around. Let's go to the urgent care right now, and I'll do all the cooking and cleaning for the next few days while you take it easy and recuperate." The second year of marriage. "Listen, darling, I don't like the sound of that cough. I'll run to the pharmacy and get whatever medication the pharmacist recommends. I'll grab something for us to eat while I'm out. You go lay down, and I'll serve you dinner in bed." The third year of their marriage. "Maybe you better relax here on the couch, honey. Nothing like a little rest when you feel lousy. I'll bring you something. Have we got any canned soup?" The fourth year. "Now look, dear, be sensible. After you've fed the kids and got the dishes done, you better lie down." The fifth year. "Why don't you go take a couple of aspirins?" The sixth year. "I wish you'd just gargle or something instead of sitting around barking like a seal all evening." The seventh year. "For Pete's sake, stop sneezing. Are you trying to give me pneumonia?" At first I found that kind of humorous. But as I thought about it, it rang true enough that it was actually pretty sad, even troubling. Because it just doesn't seem like that type of deterioration that we see of kindness and concern is what God had in mind when He envisioned the relationship we call marriage. We're going to focus upon what God intends marriage to be in today's sermon. But first, would you join with me in just a moment of prayer? Oh Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Last week we began a 4-week sermon series on faith and marriage. And though we are going to be focusing upon marriage, we will be sharing some truths that are actually applicable to any truly meaningful relationship. So last week, Kyle shared an informative and insightful sermon on the realities of marriage. And if you missed it, you will want to go back to our website and watch it, certainly because of all that Kyle had to share, but also because of Heather's part in the sermon. Yes, those of you who missed last week missed a real treat. In fact, after the worship services last week, Leanne and I were eating lunch together and visiting while we ate when I got that look on my face, or maybe it's a look in my eyes that Leanne has learned to identify that I have drifted off into deep thought on something or other. And sure enough, I had done just that. I was in deep thought, thinking about how delightful of a job Heather had done and wondering if there was some way I could adapt today's sermon to include Leanne getting up in front of everyone and sharing some of her thoughts like Heather did. And when my focus finally went from those gears that were churning in my brain back to Leanne, she immediately said, no. No, but Leanne, I didn't ask you a question. Mike, I agree with you that Heather enhanced Kyle's sermon in a delightful way this morning, but we have been married nearly 40 years, and you know very well that getting up in front of people is completely out of my comfort zone, so the answer is no. As you can tell, after 40 years, Leanne knows me pretty well. Anyway, be sure to view Kyle's sermon if you hadn't seen it. Now, those of us who have been in ministry for very long have from time to time heard statements like this. Marriage is archaic, out of date. Who needs a piece of paper to make our relationship official? It won't change the way we feel about one another at all. In that type of statement, you will notice the assumption that loving relationships are based upon feelings. How we feel about one another, pure and simple. Which is, without a doubt, the message that is encouraged by romance novels as well as the love stories we see on the big screen. Those mediums tend to define love as a burning passion that becomes a compelling force that is beyond your control. Now, I don't want to understate the influence of attraction as an important step in the development of loving relationships that last a lifetime, but I do want to get real this morning. In the initial stages of attraction to another person, our feelings, even those that we may identify as love, tend to be more about hormones and who we fantasize that person to be rather than who they really are, as it takes years and years to know a person. These initial fantasies feed our ego needs as we bask in the warmth of thinking this wonderful and attractive person is actually interested in me. Adding to that is the thrill of the hunt, as well as the excitement of putting our best foot forward to impress the other person. Commenting on all of this, Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard says, this level of attraction is more about aesthetics than love. In other words, a person who takes the perspective that love is founded upon a burning passion is not really in love with the other person. He or she loves the feelings, the thrill, the ego rush, and experiences that the other person brings. The proof of that is when the new wears off and those aspects of the relationship are gone, the person has no abiding care or concern for the other. And the relationship withers and dies. As I said earlier, romance and passion have their place in a loving and lasting relationship, as an aesthetic aspect is important in any life lived well and happily. But when the aesthetic dominates a life, relationships tend to be based only upon what's in it for me. And if I'm not getting everything I want, I move on to another relationship. For those who buy into that perspective of love and relationship, marriage presents a threat. Because when the Bible speaks of marriage, it's not talking about how much you want to receive from the other person. It's focused upon how much you are willing to give of yourself to someone. How much of your precious time, emotion, and resources are you willing to invest in that person? For marriage is based upon love that is founded in commitment. At least that was God's intention from the beginning. Have you ever noticed, as you've read the creation story in the book of Genesis, the statement, "And God saw that it was good," occurs again and again. God created light, and it was good. God created dry land, and it was good. God created vegetation, and it was good. God created birds and fish and animals, and it was good. God created humanity, and it was good. And then in the second chapter of Genesis, the section that was read for us just moments ago, God sees something that is not good. It is not good that man should be alone. So God creates a helper, a partner, a companion to be with him. In this passage, we see God's intention for marriage, that both husband and wife are to be helpers, to be partners, to be companions for one another. Now, let me point out, being a helper does not imply a subservient role for either partner, does not suggest that one controls the other. Rather, it indicates that two people bring their mutual strengths to the relationship in order to care for and bless one another, to encourage and support one another, and to build one another up. Marriage is two people committing themselves to doing just that, no matter what, as long as they both shall live. And doing that is all about authentic love. The type of love that Paul tells us is a decision, a commitment to behave in a certain way, regardless of how we might feel at any particular time. And as you well know, our feelings can be all over the place depending upon how tired we might be, what happened at work, what occurred on the drive home, or even what we've had to eat that day or not to eat that day. In his book, Love That Lasts, Timothy Keller identifies the type of feelings that tend to be present in a marriage relationship from time to time, as he imagines what Adam and Eve likely said to God. He says, Eve may have looked at Adam and then at God and said, "Really? Him? This is the best you can do? He burps, he scratches, he never listens to me, and he watches the animals play games all weekend long. When he does pay attention to me, he can't keep his hands to himself. And did you see what he made me for my birthday last year? A broom." Adam may have countered by saying, "Do you know how crazy she makes me? She's moody. She's always after me to pick up my things and talking. How could one person have so many things to say? She doesn't give me any time just to kick back in my man cave. And when it comes to being fruitful and multiply, I'm not sure she fully understood all the implications of that message." I mean, there is no doubt building relationships of lasting love can be challenging from time to time. But marriage can be and was intended to be a true blessing we would cherish for a lifetime. And for that to become a reality, we must commit ourselves to the type of love Paul speaks of that is based upon behavior rather than fickle feelings. In the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, Paul says, these are the behavioral characteristics of authentic love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Now I want to hit the pause button here for just a moment. For though God intended marriage to last a lifetime, as Paul says, to endure all things, there are reasons given within the Bible for marriages to end. Jesus said, "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh'? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." They said to Jesus, "Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her?" He said to them, "It was because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness and marries another commits adultery." In other words, unfaithfulness to the wedding vows is reason for divorce. And then you'll also read in the 7th chapter of 1 Corinthians that Paul lists abandonment as a reason for divorce. And even in the 3rd chapter of Jeremiah, God claims to have gone through a divorce because the people had been unfaithful to their covenant with Him. Now, without a doubt, Jesus lets us know that marriage is just that, a covenant. It's not a casual relationship that can be discarded thoughtlessly. It is only to be broken under serious conditions. And he goes on to say that those serious conditions do exist because of the hardness of your heart. When Jesus says that, he's referring to the sin of violating the covenant that we make when we get married, that covenant to strive to relate to our spouse with loving actions that will be a source of support, encouragement, focusing upon our spouse's welfare. This serious violation of covenant certainly happens when a spouse chooses to have an affair. And speaking of affairs, don't think for a moment that falling in love with someone is like, and being attracted to them is like catching the measles. You know, it's out of your control and irresistible. Adulterous relationships develop out of intentional, flirtatious choices. And just as you can choose to do things that cultivate flirtation toward developing to affair, you can choose to distance yourself from that flirtation. Anyway, adultery is a serious breaking of the covenant of marriage that can justify divorce. And so is abuse, whether it's physical or mental, emotional. No one should ever have to endure abuse. And abusers are being unfaithful to the vows that they have made in the covenant of marriage to be encouraging, supporting, kind, and caring. And another way that we can be unfaithful to the covenant is neglect. That is when we quit striving to be caring and considerate, supportive, and encouraging. When you put yourself or your hobbies or your work or anything above striving to do what you can to provide the encouragement and support your spouse needs, and you quit working for his or her welfare, that's neglect. And after all, marriage takes both spouses giving their best effort to express the type of love Paul refers to when he says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Now, in today's modern society, Paul probably would have said more in an inclusive way, said, "Spouses, love one another just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." And in that statement, Paul uses agape, the giving of self for the best interest of the other, day in, day out, in every way you can. That type of love creates marriages that are deeply meaningful, fulfilling, and cherished blessings as we end up making one another better persons. There's a story that I think captures what happens when two people strive to fully embrace the covenant they make when they marry. Years ago, German theologian Helmut Thickel wrote, "I once knew an old married couple who radiated tremendous happiness, the wife especially, who was almost unable to move because of old age and illness, and whose kind old face the joys and sufferings of many years had etched 1,000 wrinkles, was filled with such gratitude for life that I was touched to the quick. Involuntarily, I asked myself what could possibly be the source of this kindly old person's radiance. Otherwise, they were very common people, and their home indicated only the most modest comfort. But suddenly I knew where it all came from, for I saw these two speaking to each other, and their eyes hanging upon each other. And all at once it became clear to me that this woman was dearly loved. And it was as if she were like a stone that had been lying in the sun for years and years, absorbing all its radiant warmth, and now was reflecting back cheerfulness and warmth and serenity. Let me express it this way. It was not because she was this kind of cheerful and pleasant person that she was loved by her husband all those years. It was probably the other way around. Because she was loved, she became the person I saw before me. The truth is, loving and lasting marriages are created when two people are willing to sacrifice selfishness. That is, the selfishness of keeping all their options open. The selfishness of doing little more than using the other person for convenience, sexual pleasure, ego satisfaction, or status. Loving and lasting marriages are created when two people are willing to sacrifice selfishness and they make a commitment to God and to each other to love and cherish each other for a lifetime. And every single day, for the rest of their lives, they truly strive to live into that commitment. You see, marriage is more than just a sheet of paper. It's a commitment that is holy and beautiful. A commitment in which joy and contentment are realized. A commitment that can make us better persons. Marriage is a gift from the God who loves us like we should love one another. A gift from the God who loves us with a love that wants only the best for us.